Hello and welcome. I'm Cathal Summers, Science Week, and this is the Festival of Farming and Food. I'll be your host for this evening, and we have a fantastic event lined up for you where we'll be discussing multi-species swards and their benefits to agriculture. This is a free event, so thanks to sponsorship from Science Foundation Ireland and Teagasc. We'll be here for the next hour or so chatting to scientists from Teagasc Environmental Research Centre in Johnson Castle in Wexford, and also Neil O'Sullivan, who's a dairy farmer from Dungarvan in Waterford. You can ask also questions now live on the Q&A function down at the bottom of the screen on Zoom. I'm sure you're well used at this stage after all our COVID ordeals. And you can also look at our social media at Teagasc using the hashtag #FestFarmFood. Look, we'd love to hear from you, so keep the questions rolling in, especially as the evening is coming on, and we'll answer as many as we possibly can. The Teagasc Environmental Research Centre is based in the beautiful grounds of Johnson Castle in Wexford. It's a hive of activity where research projects across many aspects of the environment, all with the primary focus of developing a sustainable future for agriculture and meeting all our environmental commitments. Tonight, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions about the research, and we'll also hear from Neil, who has implemented some of the practices on his farm in Waterford. But first of all, we have a video to play for you. It's a really, really good video. And this video will show you the science behind multi-species swards and how you can implement it on your farm. And the stars of the video are here live with me today on Zoom to answer any of your questions you might have. And we'll get to as many as we possibly can. And as the video rolls on, feel free to throw in questions as we go on. So, and the main thing about tonight to remember is we're going to show you research straight from trial work all the way through out back onto the farm. So it's a really nice video. And now let's see what they had to say as we go virtually to Johnson Castle. And we'll see you back here in a short while.
Growing high-quality forage is vital for milk and meat production in Irish agriculture. In order to maintain yield production, nitrogen fertiliser is typically added to grassland dominated by perennial ryegrass. High levels of nitrogen fertiliser are associated with high levels of the greenhouse gas nitrous oxide, so there is considerable pressure to reduce fertiliser use. At Teagasc, we are investigating more environmentally sustainable grassland swards by mixing grasses with different clovers and herbs, which can bring multiple benefits to both farmers and the environment. My name is Saoirse Cummins and I'm a researcher here at Teagasc Johnstown Castle. Here we focus on the development, testing and implementation of technologies so the farming can be economically and environmentally sustainable. Our research aims to improve soil health, restore and protect biodiversity, improve water quality, reduce emissions, and to enhance carbon sequestration. Agriculture is faced with one of the greatest challenges, not just to feed the human population, but to do so in a way that protects the climate, soil, water, and biodiversity. The only way we will address this challenge is through research that informs better knowledge and understanding, which in turn informs changes in practice. Sustainable agriculture is like a jigsaw puzzle that will need lots of different pieces to fit together. One of the pieces is multi-species grassland swards. Multi-species swards like this one here generally contain mixtures of grasses, clovers and herbs. All of these species are high yielding and highly digestible by livestock. The grasses have root systems that mop up available nitrogen in the soil, and herbs have deeper roots that can access minerals and water in the deeper soil layers. Clovers have root nodules in which bacteria are able to take nitrogen from the atmosphere and convert it into a form that can be used by plants. A key challenge for Irish agriculture is to reduce reliance on nitrogen fertiliser. The production and spreading of nitrogen fertiliser requires a lot of fossil fuel energy and releases a lot of the greenhouse gas nitrous oxide and ammonia when applied. However, plant growth requires nitrogen, so the question is, can we reduce nitrogen without reducing plant growth? In general, we have found that different mixtures give different yields, but overall, multi-species swards deliver more yield when the same or lower amounts of nitrogen fertiliser is applied. Along with increased yield production, there are many other benefits of multi-species swards, such as lower emissions intensity. When we measured nitrous oxide emissions from different sward types, we found that the same yield can be produced with a multi-species sward as a monoculture, but with less N2O losses to the environment. There has also been research to show that the deep-rooting species within a multi-species sward, such as chicory, can increase carbon sequestration. The drought-resistant benefits of multi-species swards are important as extreme climate events are expected to happen more often due to climate change. Here at Johnstown Castle, we found that multi-species swards were less affected and recovered quicker after drought. There has also been research to show that more diverse swards improve soil biodiversity both above and below ground. Having done a lot of research on multi-species swards at plot scale, we are now implementing them on our beef and dairy research platforms at Johnstown Castle. This will help inform the development of climate-smart livestock production systems based on multi-species swards.
Hi, my name is Patti Roche. I'm running the dairy beef trials in Teagasc, Johnstown Castle. In 2020, we established a 10-hectare multi-species farmlet alongside 10-hectare perennial ryegrass and grass clover farmlets. All systems are stocked at 2.4 livestock units per hectare, grazed by dairy beef, Angus, Hereford, Limousin cattle. The aim of the study is to evaluate the production performance of 3 farm systems, whereby the clover and multi-species systems will have reduced levels of nitrogen input compared to the perennial ryegrass control. In 2019, on the dairy farm, we established multi-species on a 7-hectare farmlet alongside a similar grass clover farmlet, both systems stocked at 2.65 livestock units per hectare, grazed by high EBI spring calving dairy cows, with the aim of each system being self-sufficient, i.e. the farmlet would grow enough forage to feed the cows during the grazing season, whilst also growing enough surplus during the high growth months to make enough winter forage. We established good multi-species swards using min-till and sow with minimal weed invasion and no post-emergent sprays. On the beef farm, we saw moderate establishment of herbs stitched directly into the new sward. We saw poor establishment of herbs where broadcast using the Einbocken coupled with watery slurry. The clover and grass established well in this broadcasting method. Now that we got the grass established, will the cows eat it? Yes is the short answer. Cows appear to be quite happy with their mixed diet. Post-Grazing Heights for the first 2 years in the dairy have been similar, 3.95 centimetres. We do notice the cows preferentially seeking out the clover and plantain and leaving the more bitter tasting chicory to last, but so far the cows are content with the sward. The dairy beef stock are the same, they will graze the chicory last. The calves are the slowest to take the chicory, but they are happily grazing the chicory now in September. So the livestock are eating it, but are they performing on these pastures? Figures show our first full grazing season in 2020 were very positive, with cows producing similar milk solids per cow across both systems, 535 kilos per cow with 845 kilos of concentrate. Figures for this year are likely to be similar or better. Figures so far this year are showing the cattle are maintaining the same growth as the perennial ryegrass cattle on the beef trial. Now that the livestock are performing on the multi-species swards, can we grow enough to sustain our stocking rate? Total production on the dairy for 2020 was 1 tonne per hectare short of our 15 tonne a hectare target. The 2021 season is shaping up to be better, but we still may be slightly overstocked at 2.65 livestock units per hectare. Multi-species swards in the beef unit have produced up to 12 tonne per hectare with 50 to 60 kilos of nitrogen per hectare. The multi-species and clover swards did not receive nitrogen from April through to September. Can we make silage from these swards and how will it feed out? The dairy made excellent quality silage from the multi-species swards in 2020. It takes some careful planning. The swards tend to be lower in dry matter percentage by 3 to 4 units, so we need a longer wilt or good drying conditions to get our dry matter percentage above our target of 30%. How persistent are the multi-species swards under grazing conditions? This for us is the biggest question that still remains to be answered, and it will probably be another 3 to 4 years before we could have a definitive conclusion. The sward composition has definitely changed since establishment, with a significant reduction in the chicory herb and increase in clover content. If the herbs continue to reduce in volume as expected, what will take its place? Hopefully our grass will tiller out and clover extend its stolons to avoid weeds establishing. Botanical compositions are being tracked throughout the year. As our study progresses, we hope to refine our grazing strategies to best suit the multi-species swards. This may mean adjusting pre-post grazing heights, artificial fertiliser applications and strategies, adjusting our opening and closing cover targets, and adjusting our stocking rates. As a normal commercial farmer, what's in it for me? The obvious saving is fertiliser nitrogen, just 65 kilos of nitrogen applied to the multi-species swards in 2021. Other not so immediately obvious benefits may be a healthier soil structure. The benefits of a deep-rooting herb such as chicory may extend beyond the life of the plant itself. John's plot trials found greater drought resistance. If multi-species can offer benefits in terms of environmental sustainability whilst maintaining or increasing productivity, that's a win-win for all parties. Any new system will bring its own set of challenges and potential disadvantages. Whilst results to date have been very promising, a few areas of concern would be around a slower spring growth pattern, a more open sward which may be more prone to poaching, and the potential risk of bloat. No issues have arisen yet, but it's something some farmers have encountered and something which will be monitored closely. Doing what we've always done, or even doing what we've always done better, may no longer be an option. Multi-species swards might be part of the answer, but we as researchers have a lot of questions to address before we can be sure of it.
We're down in Dungarvan today here on the farm Neil and Gillian O'Sullivan, and we're here to talk to Neil about multi-species swards. How's the farm, Neil?
How's it going, Cathal?
Great day for it.
It's a lovely day, yeah. You're very welcome anyway.
Thanks a million. Will we head in and have a look, see what's going on here?
We'll go in and see, yeah.
Thanks a million. So you're farming down in Dungarvan, Neil. Can you tell me the type of farming you're doing down here?
Myself and Gillian, Cathal, we're dairy farming. So we're milking 100 cows, 100 crossbred cows once a day here on the farm. It's an outside block of land. It's 5 kilometres away from where we live. So we rear all our own young stock and cut silage at home, and then we milk the cows over here.
And I suppose just looking around at the land type around here, is it kind of free drain land?
Extremely so, yeah. We're, it's a blessing a lot of the time. It's very good for getting out and grazing early and late in the shoulders of the year as such, but no more than any other farm, it has its challenges as well. So because we're so free draining and so dry during the summer, we're very prone to drought and to heat stress in the grass, and we do see a dip in pasture production and sometimes a fodder deficit in the middle of the summer when we have prolonged dry spells.
Yeah, look, and that's always going to be a challenge down the southeast when we have those type of soils. But I know when we drove the spade to the ground, heard a bang of stone underneath. And when we looked at the pollution impact potential maps from the EPA a few minutes ago, it's kind of showing us you're in a really nitrate vulnerable zone here. So I suppose that's high on the agenda for you.
It is high on the agenda, yeah. So the groundwater, it doesn't hang around for long. It's going somewhere fairly fast, and so we have to be mindful of what we're putting into the soil. And as part of our mission statement is to reduce our chemical input, reduce our nitrogen input, and hopefully by doing some of the things like establishing the multi-species, we can sort of increase the resilience of the soil and hopefully its capacity to kind of hold on to water as well.
Yeah, and look, we're standing in a field, a really good multi-species field at the moment. Why did you take the jump? I know multi-species has been around for a few years, but only the last year or two farmers are starting to take the jump, and not everyone, only a few. Why did you take the jump?
There's a couple of reasons, Cathal. I suppose part of our plan on the farm is to reduce our inputs, reduce our dependency on chemical inputs like nitrogen. And the other thing is we're kind of looking at the farm to identify areas where what we're doing previously hasn't been working. So this field, twice in the 11 years that we've been farming here, we've lost ryegrass. So it's been reseeded, and through severe drought, we've just lost all the ryegrass in the field, and its production has plummeted. So we selected a multi-species mix, with several different species of plant in it. They've got different rooting patterns and profiles, and they're accessing nutrients and moisture from different levels of the soil. So hopefully that's going to, make it more resilient and a better productive pasture for us.
Yeah, look, and we can hear from Jack Nolan from the Department of Agriculture lately that nitrogen is high on the agenda. We need to reduce our inputs. So that's one problem solving. And the second one is you're drought resistant, so you're killing two birds with one stone. So it's really, really good.
Hopefully that's the plan anyway. So far it's working well, but we are very much in the early stages.
And you mentioned that you have seen some biodiversity even already of small animals change in this field alone.
Yeah, so we've plenty of rabbits. They were here already. And we have deer. We've had flocks of wood pigeons have come into the place since the sward has been established, and that has a knock-on effect. Then we've plenty of birds of prey. We've buzzards resident on the farm, and we're even starting to see other visitors come in, like red kites and things. So it's hopefully hugely positive for the whole ecology of the place.
So when you came to the point where you decided, right, I'm going to go ahead with multi-species sward, how did you sow it? I suppose that's what a farmer really wants to know, right? I've decided I'm going to go ahead with it. How did you sow it? What varieties did you put in?
Yeah, it's a challenging field to deal with, with machinery. You can kind of see, hopefully, how hilly it is, what the degree of slope is. So fortunately, we had a very good contractor who came along, basically gave it 2 light runs of a disc harrow and then set it with a 1-pass system. And it really established very, very well. We spread kind of what we would normally spread on a reseed, is about 3 bags of 18-6-12. It's had no nitrogen input since. So it's kind of based on the Teagasc research kind of template. It has 2 varieties of perennial ryegrass, tetraploid and a diploid. We have several varieties of clover, white clover, red clover, hybrid. We have a couple of more hardy kind of grasses like timothy and meadow fescue, and then you have herbs of plantain and chicory.
Yeah, and you can see it looks quite strong there at the moment. Is there anything, I suppose, before you go to sow as regards fertility and weed control that you have to think about before you stick one of these crops in?
Well, you need to target, I suppose, optimal fertility in any field when you're trying to establish a new crop. The indexes in this field were never terribly poor. I feel often what we were lacking in it was organic matter. It was very difficult to return organic matter to the soil in form of slurry and manure, but our indexes were good, our pH was good. The whole field was burnt off with Roundup. And apart from that, there's been nothing since. We obviously can't use a post-emergence spray because we're trying to preserve all the herbs and the legumes. But we haven't had an issue. I think when we have a nice dense sward established with good competition between the different plant species, you're less likely to get a weed taking over and dominating. And that's what we're seeing so far.
Yeah, and I think some of the research has shown that the multi-species swards are outcompeting some of the weeds, so that's a big help. So Neil, I suppose you mentioned there a minute ago as well the root structures here in these crops, and we have additional benefits there, I suppose, for maybe storing carbon down, maybe doing a bit of work on your soil and even the microbes.
Yeah, yes, Cathal, I suppose we're trying to think about all aspects of how we're impacting the environment by what we're doing, and soil health is something that people are kind of talking about increasingly. I suppose hard to know sometimes what that means, but I guess it means how do you enable the soil to perform all the functions that it needs to for us and for the environment. And nature likes diversity, and monocultures, as you know, we've long experience of that monocultures don't necessarily prove successful in the long term. So if we can learn how to work with a more diverse pasture that can be very productive, I think we can only have positive effects on soil health, and that goes for microbiology, it goes for carbon sequestration, and the whole works.
Yeah, and I suppose going back to the management of it, so you have multi-species swards here and you have monocultures in some of the other parts of the farm. Do you have to treat them a bit differently as how you graze them or how you close plots or open plots?
Yeah, our management has been consciously different from the start. So since we've set the field, there's been no nitrogen input here. Okay, so we're not following the cows with any bag nitrogen on this paddock. We've already gone down the road of reducing our nitrogen on our clover paddocks, but this is probably a step further. We are grazing it at maybe a slightly higher pre-grazing yield. The cover we're going into is a little bit higher, and we're trying to leave a bit more of a residual on the paddock Cathal. So there's a couple of reasons for that. We're allowing I suppose particularly the herbs to establish a little bit better and get a better root structure before they're grazed. And then by leaving a higher cover, especially in this field, we're providing a bit more protection for the ground, cover for it, and preventing more moisture losses through evaporation. So that's kind of how we're approaching it. The cows love it. They would graze it to the floor if we let them when they come in, and we see a nice increase in our milk solids post grazing as well, probably similar to what we see when we graze conventional swards with a good clover content.
Yeah, and rotation length, is it the same, or do you have to move it around a little bit?
I'm really just kind of going on pre-grazing yield at the moment. Sort of when it's reaching 1500, I'm coming in. At the moment, it's probably, I think it's about 3 weeks since this was grazed, about 20 days, I think, since this was grazed, and we'll probably go back in a week or 10 days' time.
Yeah, and I know the clover loves a bit of light, so will you have to maybe graze this towards your last plot nearly, or?
Yeah, there shouldn't be any problem doing this. It's such a hardy paddock.
Yeah.
The soil, it's almost impossible to poach it nearly. So hopefully we'll be able to graze it off in November and see what happens then over the winter. But again, we won't be grazing it bare. We'll be trying to leave a little bit of cover there as well. And that kind of goes back into what your question was about soil health and microbiology. I think sometimes we forget about those workers on our farm, and we need to feed them as well. So leaving bare soil, especially over the winter, is not necessarily a good thing. And
$1 million question. I know you're grass measuring. Is this plot standing up to some of the other plots in the farm, the monocultures?
Currently, so we reseeded a paddock on the other end of the farm in more conventional style. Now it's got good clover content as well, and probably getting half the rate of nitrogen of the other paddocks. But comparing the two, it's growing exactly the same amount of dry matter since 1st of June.
So you're spreading half the rate of nitrogen, and you're still growing the same amount of grass.
And we've spread zero nitrogen here. We're still growing the same tonnage. And on a clover paddock, we're spreading half the amount of nitrogen and still growing the same amount. So
they're almost too good to be true.
It can be done.
Yeah.
It can be done. Yeah.
No, it's great. That's going to solve big issues, I suppose, as regards when if the regulations go down the route that you have to reduce nitrogen, that this is another tool, another option, and a massive option.
It is, yeah. I think we're all going to have to go there in some shape or form to a greater or lesser extent, and that's I think that's only for good. It will pose challenges for sure, but look, none of us want to be spending our hard-earned money on nitrogen if we're able to work with nature to do the job for us. So look, we're open to everything. Use every trick in the book.
So I know one of the big questions that farmers always ask is about persistency. So after 3-4 years, some of the chicory and plantain might start to go out. Have you thought that far ahead, how you're going to maybe oversow or take care of that problem?
Yeah, we did look at that, Cathal. It was a concern that people have highlighted that, particularly the chicory probably dies out after a season or two, and maybe you're starting to lose a bit of the diversity in the sward. So with that in mind, and also with the view to being able to maybe establish more clover on other parts of the farm, we purchased a second-hand Guttler seeder during the summer. So we'll be using that as probably as much as the fertiliser spreader to try and rejuvenate swards, to maybe top up swards as necessary. And again, kind of coming back to using plants and using natural processes rather than chemical.
And I don't think that's the thing that farmers should fear. We're used to growing grass and will adapt to it. But surely the reduction in nitrogen, that bill has been reduced as well. So it allows for you to buy more seed and at much less cost, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, we've all seen how the nitrogen prices have risen this year, and with the demand for fossil fuels and probably carbon taxes, fertilizer is going to become increasingly expensive. It's not that we're going to be able to drop it completely, but if we're able to reduce its impact on our budgets, then all for the better. Seed is far cheaper.
And you have a couple of acres in now, Neil. Do you plan to extend your multi-species swards maybe more in the future, to sow a few more acres?
Yeah, well, we have probably 40 to 50% of the farm, Cathal, is similar to this ground, maybe not quite as extreme, but it's shallow soil, free draining, suffering from stress in the summer. So I would envisage a huge part for multi-species swards on those areas of the farm. And time will tell. We're feeling our way with cow performance and grazing and how to manage them, but I definitely think a proportion of our farm from now on is going to be done in this every year.
What I really like about this farm is you've put in a plot, you're kind of looking to see how it suits your system and how you can manage it, and then maybe to adapt it across more of the farm later on. If there's a farmer or two at home kind of wondering, will I or won't I? And there's lots of them, because we know there's trust issues, I suppose. We have to trust that the plant is going to give us nitrogen rather than the bag. If they're on the fence like that, is there any tips or advice you could give maybe to help them make a decision?
It's get off the fence. Is that too blunt? No, probably just have a look at the farm and identify the areas. We all have them, I would guess, where the conventional sward isn't performing for us. And then you're not really losing much by trying something new, you know, and the results might be just surprise you, might be unexpectedly good. You said we've nothing to fear from it, and I think that's 100% right. You know, the only thing we have to fear is you know, standing still and not being able to adapt, not being able to change. So this is something that's in our own hands. We can roll with this. We can get ahead of the curve in terms of our environmental impact and just start at one field at a time.
So Neil, look, there's lots of challenges out there, and I'll go back to something you said at the very start. You said we can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result.
Hopefully that probably sums up the philosophy, yeah.
Thank you very much for your time. I think it's really good what you're doing here in the farm. Thanks a million, Neil.
Thank you, Cathal.
Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the video. It's great to see researchers' journey from plot to farm, and I hope ear to the ground weren't watching Neil or he'll have a new job, I'd say, next week. Excellent video, and great to see the farm and what's going on in the farm. So first of all, I'd like to welcome here today the interviewees from the video and our panel for this evening's discussion. So can you all turn on your cameras, please? Okay. Lovely. One or two more to come on, do we? So first of all, we have Dr. Saoirse Cummins, who's a research officer in Teagasc. We have Patti Roche, technical staff member working on the research team in Johnson Castle. We have Aidan Lawless, who's the dairy farm manager in Johnson Castle. We also have Neil O'Sullivan joining us, who runs a dairy farm in Waterford. And of course, myself, I'm Cathal Summers, and I work as a sustainability advisor for Teagasc in Waterford. So if anyone has seen me around Waterford, I work for the ASA program. Just to mention in the background as well, not to forget that there's a lot of work and a lot of cogs turned in the background. We also have Luis Lopez Sangel, Anna Fenlon, Siobhan Darmley, who are all working behind the scenes. They're taking their questions and feeding them through to us. So please do use the Q&A function at the bottom. And there's plenty of questions rolling in already, but keep them coming. You have a great opportunity now here that you have researchers, you have farm managers, and you have an actual farmer online that can answer those questions that we're all wondering, those tricky questions. And don't forget, you can also check social media on the @Teagasc using the hashtag #FestFarmFood. We definitely love to hear from you, so keep them rolling in. Saoirse, I suppose I just want to ask you a question there first. Can you tell me, before we hit to the audience questions, can you tell me, like, how long has the research been going on there, and why is it only coming to the fore now?
So I suppose there's been a lot of research carried out over the last 10 years in Ireland. But I suppose we're only seeing kind of more implementation of multi-species swards recently. There's been a lot of really positive results published on yield and animal performance as well. And then I suppose the drought during the summer of 2018 made kind of hit a lot of farmers hard. So a lot of farmers were looking for more drought resilient options, like as Neil mentioned in the video as well.
Yeah, and I suppose, Patti, we're near the end of the grazing season now, I suppose, and plots are starting to be closed off. What strategy or plan do you have in place to close covers maybe before the winter?
Yeah, we had decided to keep the covers kind of low there on some of the clover and herbs there, just to keep the light down, and then the chicory tends to melt away at this time of year anyway, a little bit. So, yeah. Excellent.
And like we've mentioned, Neil has mentioned he's kind of bragging a little bit there with the lovely dry soils up here in Dungarvan. So, but Aidan, what type of land do you have down there in Johnson Castle, just to let the viewers know, and what's your P's and K's and your lime like up there, your pH?
Yeah, Carl, so we'd have mixed soil types, I suppose. Really, we would have, especially on the multi-species swards in Johnstown, we'd have a heavy clay, some loam, with heavy clay soils mainly, and so it would be a bit heavier than what Neil will be used to, but definitely a bit lighter than what some visitors we've had over the last few months in Johnstown on. In terms of the P and K and lime, most of our P's and K's be index 3s and 4s. We're conscious of that, obviously, for the environmental centre where we are. So, and I think that's important to grow a good crop. And then the pH, we're monitoring that as well. So typically 6.5, 6.6. And we're monitoring that yearly. Obviously too early yet to say whether there's any difference coming between whether the multi-species is picking up a little bit more K down lower, but we'll be monitoring that as the years go on as well. So.
Yeah, and probably you make an important point there. Like we're always saying it, but lime is so important, like keeping the pH correct for your land. So it's a vital point.
It's
Neil,
the cheapest fertiliser, Cathal, at the moment. Definitely in next year, it's the cheapest fertiliser. And like I think regardless, maybe some people will start to mind their P's and K's, but like get the P's, K's and lime right. And even farmers that don't have multi-species or clover probably can look at reducing even their end inputs just on getting those right first. And I mean, I know Teagasc and yourselves have been banging on and out about that for years, but I think they'll be pushing an open door maybe next year. So.
Yeah, 100% unlocks phosphorus. It's better for nitrogen use efficiency. So many benefits. And like you said, the price of fertilizer at the moment, you'd be crazy not to be trying to get your pHs correct. Neil, I suppose just to talk about your stocking rate there a little bit. I know you mentioned in the video that you have 2 blocks, about 5 kilometers apart. On one block, on the home block, you have young stock, and you have on maybe silage ground as well. On the other block, you have the milking platform. But what stocking rate are you at there at the moment?
We'd be sort of moderately stocked, I suppose you'd say, Cathal. We're a little under 2.5 livestock units per hectare on the milking platform, and a bit lower than that then on our whole farm overall. It'd be a little bit less than 2.3. So we're not massively stocked, I guess. But interestingly enough, we've had to stock the farm appropriately, proportionate, I suppose, to how much grass we're able to grow, to our forage growth profile. And as we touched on in the video, we come under severe pressure in the summertime, especially on the milking platform. So that's kind of limited our stocking rate, if you like, because it can become very expensive to feed a lot of animals when you're not growing grass, as we all discovered, or as the rest of the country discovered in 2018. But I would see obviously a role for multi-species in changing that growth profile and maybe helping us to fill that gap a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. I suppose the point I'm making there is that I remember a couple of years ago when I started talking about multi-species swards, especially on dairy farms, I was kind of nearly laughed off the farm, and people kind of at that time thought maybe the research wasn't quite there, wasn't published at the time, and maybe Saoirse will comment on this in a little while, but people kind of thought it was only more for organic farming and for maybe lowly stock beef farms. That's not really the case, Neil, is it?
Sorry. No, I think there's applications for absolutely everybody here, regardless of your intensity, because the research has shown, Saoirse and Patti have explained really, really well that they're seeing exactly the same level of pasture production with less input, and no matter how lightly or heavily stocked you are, that's, that qualifies as a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I suppose we'll get to some questions there from the audience, and viewers, keep your questions coming in. We'll try and answer as many as we can. There's a couple of very good questions in there at the moment. So there's one question that have to come in here, and maybe Patti, or Patti or Saoirse, we have a question here about there's one of the viewers that are finding lower milk solids yield from the dairy cows on multi-species. Can you tell me? And they're kind of commenting, said, is it due to maybe grazing at the incorrect pre-grazing cover? Can you tell me maybe what you found maybe in the trial work, or what kind of coverage you're going into?
Again, you might take that one maybe with the dairy covers.
Yeah, okay, Patti. Thanks. Yeah, so in terms of the milk yield for both 2020 and 2021, we're almost finished milk yield out this year in 2021 as well. We're coming down to the last 30, 40 days lactation. And we've seen no difference in performance compared to grass clover swards. So, and we're post-grazing height is a bit lower than what Neil would be on his farm. It's about 4 centimetres. You just have to be careful. I think in terms of the multi-species mix that I think Saoirse was talking as well. It's a 6-way mix that we're putting in, and it's probably something similar to what Neil has in terms of a productive sward. So our grasses are high productive sward grasses, and then the clovers and legumes. So we're only going with a 6-way mix. So it might be, I don't know, at farm levels, some farm levels, we would have had a lot of farmers come in through discussion groups, and they'd have actually found the opposite, that they would say nearly did see a pickup in performance when they hit the multi-species. So maybe some farms have a more diverse multi-species mix, that there might not be the same productive swards or herbs in it. And then obviously if post-grazing height is higher, you just have to be careful that you don't try to force them down to graze down lower in the next round. If you're grazing to 6 centimetres in June, you're going to have to graze to 6 centimetres or higher in July, unless you start correcting it with topping or something. So unless Neil might have a comment on that as well, in terms of what he's found on his farm.
What covers are you coming in at, Neil?
We've been in around 14 or 1500, which is not terribly high. Obviously, it's a newly established sward, so all the plants in it, and particularly the grasses, are very young. They're highly digestible. So we are seeing a modest increase, really. You would probably say about 5% of a lift in terms of milk solids, post grazing that sward. And as I said in the video, that's on par with what we're getting really from our very good clover swards. When you compare it then to ryegrass only, kind of in other areas of the farm, it would be, it's a benefit. It's a positive result in animal performance. But yeah, so the digestibility of the sward is, as Aidan was saying there, is, I think that's huge. So if you're getting into very, very heavy covers like the 2,500 or something like that, it's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah. Look, just one other comment that I thought about when Aidan, you mentioned about your grazing heights. Now, traditionally, when we're grazing, perennial ryegrass, we're in at down to 4 centimetres. That's been always the way. But I know from talking to another really good multi-species producer, Kevin O'Hanlon, up there, he's said that if you graze down to 4, it's a bit harder on the plants coming back, because the roots need a bit of energy. So I think he was doing it in around 6 centimetres, I think, something like that. He was finding it good.
Yeah, when we set up the trial initially, I suppose we didn't really know what, and there's, like John Finn would be very always emphasizing, like there's 40, 50 years work on perennial ryegrass swards and correcting post-grazing heights, and we had golf ball grazing, and then we had 6 centimetres, 4 centimetres and all. So there's a lot more work to be done on the multi-species, but I'd just be conscious that you can't let the tail wag the dog either, and a lot of our production is still coming from the grass within the multi-species, the grass and the clover. And so there's more work to be done on it, definitely. But what I can confidently say, and we can only say our experiences in Johnstown, that when post-grazing heights are similar, we can match performance, or actually this year might slightly outperform a good grass clover sward grazed to similar heights. The question then is really, I think a lot of farmers may be more concerned about what impact that'll have on the composition of the sward going forward, and the persistency of the sward. And maybe there's questions over that, but I think from what I've been talking to a lot of farmers, and would agree that probably the chicory won't really persist over a long period anyway, but it might have done a lot of its good work in the first couple of years in establishment in terms of the soil composition. And even Saoirse might want to comment on that.
Yeah, so that's just on heavier soils.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you kind of look at say in a 6 species mixture with Timothy and ryegrass, those species kind of have shown to perform well in heavy soils. And then when you look at, say, deep rooting species such as chicory, they can help in breaking up the soil profile, and that'll increase your aeration and help with drainage.
That's vitally important, Saoirse, because I suppose today part of what Neil discussed in the video is he's looking to reduce nitrogen, but he's also looking to make grass perform better on free drain soils. But I'm sure we have lots of people online here at the moment that have moderate to heavier soils, so that infiltration, the chicory roots, you saw it in the video, they're nearly 3/4 of an inch thick, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely going to help break up the soil profile if you have kind of wetter, heavier soil.
Yeah. Neil, just when Aidan brought up persistency, I don't want to skip by it because I'm sure a lot of people are going to talk about it, discuss it. But when it's brought up, you have an interesting view on persistency. Yes, maybe some of the chicory might go out after 2-3 years, but what do you plan to do on it?
Yeah, I wouldn't be afraid of the persistency issue, Cathal. I think we will still have a very, very good sward. Yes, we might be losing some of the herbs and some of the benefits that they might bring, but we always have options. You know, we can, as I said in the video, there's a tentative plan if need be to oversow or stitch in some seed, so we could go back in maybe with a couple of kilos per acre of chicory and plantain at the right time. You know, I'd be open to experimentation on it, but it's not something that I'd be worried about.
Yeah, I'd be of the same opinion, and I, even as lately as Friday, it came up in the discussion group. It was the question was asked about persistency, but like we're farming, our job is to grow grass and plant stuff. I don't think it's a big issue. I think it's a one that will solve. I'd be more interested in the actual general day to day, like the first question about grazed cover heights, time of the year, closed plots, open plots, that kind of stuff, avoiding poaching. But we'll discuss that maybe in more detail in a few minutes. Another question's popped up, and it's a good question. Maybe we'll throw it out there to Aidan or Patti. What's the best time of year to sow multi-species swards, or when did you sow them in Johnson Castle?
I'll go with the dairy first because we established it a year before, and then Patti can comment maybe on the beef. So we established unusual, maybe compared to a normal farm. We had to establish the whole farm, if you like, over the space of a year. We were able to do that because it was only a small area of the whole farm in Johnstown. So we started, our first swards were established in the bank holiday weekend of May, bank holiday weekend, sort of late April, early May, and we went right through and we established good multi-species swards. And the 3rd of September was probably the last plot sown. So over a range of different periods, I'd say probably the best time to sow it is when it fits in within your system. So typically in Johnstown, we have an autumn calving herd. So generally the best time to sow reseed in an autumn calving herd is when your demand is lower in August, September, or probably July, August really. Maybe for the spring calving, reseeding earlier in the year when you're if you can afford to take out some of your area that's silage ground or something, depends on your platform. But I wouldn't be too concerned about when to get a good establishment. And we have used different methods of reseeding as well. And O'Neill was saying because of the soil that he was on there, or the slope on the field and all, he disked it. So we did a full burn off and stitched it directly in with a Valderstadt drill. It worked well. It was very slow to start off. That was the one that was done in late September. So it was slow to establish over the winter, but kicked in very well the following year. And then we would have done plough till reseed as well. And I know Patti had done a lot of disking in the beef unit as well. So different methods similar to conventional reseeding. But if Patti wants to comment there.
Yeah, we would have done disking too, and we got very good establishment both in the spring and the autumn. And then we would have trialed the oversowing as well. So we would have done that just after silage. And we stitched straight into freshly cut swards. So when the grass was still green, we didn't spray it off like Aidan did, and we got good establishment there of clover in the clover ones, and then off clover and herbs in the multi-species ones. And then we trialed oversowing, just spreading it on the top of the ground, and the herbs didn't take as well, but we had good establishment of the grass and clover.
And Patti, what did you just graze that down harder after silage, was it?
Yes, we tried to keep the light down to get everything going, and then we just kind of left it for a bit to let everything establish then once everything had come up.
Yeah, look, I think a point on grass growth as well, it's important to make. Aidan, you mentioned that one didn't take too well in late September. But generally late September, I know this year was a little bit different. We had a good winter, or a good September. It was warm and there's a bit of moisture there, but in general, the last couple of years, some of our September's into October and quite wet and cold as well. So the later you get, it's like the old saying, a day in August is worth a week in September for growth rate. So that's something to consider, I'd say as well. Saoirse, a question here for you. This is a good question as well. We can get species mixes anything up to 5, 6, 7, 10, 12. Why did you go with 6? Why not 10, 11, 12 different species mixes in the grass?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I suppose the most important thing isn't essentially the number of species, but it's more the number of functional groups and kind of the complementarity between the different functional groups. So I suppose the important thing is to have a good mixture of maybe 2 or 3 species of grasses, legumes, and herbs. So they're all carrying out a different function within the sward.
Yeah, and I suppose we probably talked a lot in the beginning about production, milk solids, and production in say for dairying, for beef and sheep and stuff. We're talking about growth rates, but we kind of forget those hidden kind of traits where my background is soilsy, so I'm very interested in that physical structure underneath the bonnet, I suppose, that in heavier land that water can infiltrate through and nutrients can move around. And in the lighter soils, then it's the same thing, they're not losing too much water. But just another thing there, I suppose we're wondering about, there's another good question came in here about the percentage, and I'll answer this one actually, percentage of countries at suboptimal levels. And I'm presuming that they're talking about P's and K's maybe in line. And not, this is countries now, not Ireland. Wondering will multi-species swards work, and Saoirse, you can row in here as well. But I suppose we can only work within our own country in Ireland. So if there's someone external in Ireland, I think Aidan, you mentioned at the very get-go, one of the most important things for multi-species swards or grass clover swards, or even a grass sward, is get your P's and K's and your lime right. Saoirse, would that be fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. Like getting your soil fertility right, kind of regardless of what kind of sward is being sown, that's the thing to kind of nail down first.
It's like Mark Plunkett always says in Teagasc, it's like a 3-legged stool. If one of the legs is shorter than the other, it's going to rock or fall down. So yeah, you have to look after the bread and butter stuff first. This is a trick. This is one maybe for you, Neil, or if you can think of it, or Aidan. What's the cost? What did it cost you to sow the multi-species swards? The wallet, open the wallet, is the receipt in there?
I would think that the cost of the seed per acre is probably a little bit more than just the standard ryegrass and clover mix. Probably maybe 40 to 50% more expensive. Other than that, exactly the same cost as any other reseed. But probably what's more interesting maybe is what we've saved in the meantime. You know, we've and this is probably a movable feast at the moment, given the changing price of nitrogen. But to date, I would think we've saved about €95 a hectare in terms of nitrogen not spread, while still seeing the pasture production. So look, if there is a little bit of an extra outlay in establishing it, it pays back.
Just Cathal, on that, the cost of establishment for our plots in Johnstown was the same. So Neil is right. The cost of the seed is more expensive, but our seeding rate was lower. So we sowed about 24, 25 kilos per hectare of the multi-species mix, and we would have been sowing about 35, 37 kilos of the grass seed mix. So I'm not sure whether Neil maybe mightn't have reduced as much the seeding rate, but the recommendation is to reduce the seeding rate a little bit. And if the seeding rate is reduced, the actual cost of the seed is the same. So obviously, compared to conventional reseeding, which are perennial ryegrass, your establishment method is going to be the same. Your P's and K's are going to be the same. So the only real difference will be in the seed cost. And if you're reducing the seeding rate a little bit, it should work out similar enough.
Yeah, that's interesting, Aidan. We left nothing to chance. We're a bit worried about the quality of the seed bed. So yeah.
Well, it was on John's recommendation, I think, just to and maybe that's why our sward maybe is a little bit more open or not. So, and I'd agree, I would have been a very similar view. That's why we'd normally go 35, 37 kilos per hectare, where some farmers will chance 30, but I'd prefer when reseeding not to leave anything to chance either, but just in order to give a good chance for the multi-species to establish. That was what John was recommending, and he had a good lot of experience with it on plot trials anyway. So. Yeah.
When you're putting it in, Neil, what did your P's and K's are good enough. What did you put in? Did you throw a few bags of 10, 10, 20 on? Did you throw any nitrogen? What did you do when you're planting or sowing?
Yeah, we didn't depart from the standard procedure, which would be to spread either 10, 10, 20 or 18, 6, 12. I think it got 2.5 bags or 3 bags of 18, 6, 12, and that it's had nothing since. So yeah, that's. I guess we wanted to give it a fair comparison as well between the other swards that were being established at the same time and the ones that we've done in previous years. So that's where we went. Whether we needed to apply that much nitrogen or not, probably we could have gotten away with less. we'll certainly be managing it with a lot less nitrogen from now on. Anyway.
You've put no nitrogen on that, Neil, this year, have you?
No. It got a good application of slurry before setting. So after we sprayed it off before setting it, we got an adventurous soul came into the field with an umbilical system and give a good application of slurry. So that may have benefited as well. But no, it's gotten no nitrogen since. I think the plan would be, I think there was a question there, Cathal, was there, about the plan for next year? I might as well touch on it. What we were planning on doing is putting about 30 units of urea maybe out on it in April and leave it to its own devices then for the rest of the year.
Aidan, or Patti, maybe you might better. Did you put in? Did you put some nitrogen on it in November in your sward, or did you run it from May on without nitrogen?
Well, we certainly didn't put nitrogen on in November, Cathal.
Sorry, September. Slipping the tongue there.
Yeah, just kind of think of it on Neil's point as well. Maybe farmers just need to be careful. I'd be maybe depending on their PK status. If they are going with nitrogen in the spring, they might be better looking maybe at a compound if or definitely if not to go with a straight during the year to keep if you're taking off 14-15 tons of grass, you do need to be conscious of your PK status, and you could run it down if you're taking a bit off, especially if you happen to take off a surplus cutter. And so obviously depending on what your P and K status is, but sometimes maybe I know even similar to what maybe James Humphrey's doing in Solihead with the clover plots, like going with a bag of 0730 mid-season or maybe 2 bags depending on what your PK status is. Just for the first year in 2020, we didn't really know a lot about it. We had a target on the system to spread about 100-120 kgs of N per hectare per year, and we were down at I think about 65. So for the first year, we spread about 18-20 kilos of N in the last round. Against probably a better judgment, really, it didn't really look deficient, or it didn't look as though it needed it, but we said we'd put it on it because just to see whether there was any kick in it. But like common sense would suggest definitely if the clover is doing its job, that there's a long bank of nitrogen there. And I'd say it's probably important if you have a good clover sward or a good multi-species sward not to be putting on nitrogen then, because you could be just leaving a legacy of sort of a risk of maybe denitrifying later in the year if you're on that wrong type of soil. So we didn't do it this year, and I think Patti probably didn't do it in the beef unit any late application this year either, because the sward didn't really look as though it needed it.
Yeah, look, David Waldo and Johnson Castle always say that you'd be banking nitrogen every month throughout the year, and there can be a little bit extra in September anyway. So I'd say you get away without it. But look, they're real important. You saw Neil or grass measuring, and you're doing it in Johnson Castle as well. If you're grass measuring regularly, you can make decisions based on your measurements really, really quickly. You can make very good judgments. So I think there's a great case there for people to do grass measuring. There's lots of people starting to do it and doing it, but there's lots of, I suppose, more opportunity for people to do it as well. Just going back there, Patti or Saoirse, question for you, I suppose. Somebody's asking, are multi-species swards better for those heavier or even peaty soils, or those lighter mineral soils, or is it does it do a job for everything?
Yeah, so I suppose if you look at a multi-species sward, all the different species or functional groups will have different traits. So they can adapt to different soils, and they have shown good results just talking to farmers on both types. So yeah, positive results for both types.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And we have discussed that as well, that, Neil is doing it, I suppose, using deep-rooted plants to get down to that water. And look, we have all the microbes and the microbiomes that are getting the benefit from the mixed species as well. And also in the heavier soils, we have that root system that's working really well. There is a question here, and it's an important one because it always comes up. How do animals adapt to different swards, multi-species swards one day and maybe a monoculture ryegrass the next day? So that dreaded word bloat, and if anyone ever had bloat, Neil, you are a practicing vet still, you do a little bit veterinary, you're probably the man for this job. Are you putting that in place for bloat? Or I know people are using bloat oils and stuff.
Nothing at all, Cathal. We've a few years experience of handling swards with heavy clover content, and initially I would approach those with a bit of caution. in terms of not putting the cows in there when they're very, very hungry. Sometimes putting up a temporary strip wire to restrict access to the whole field so that they don't kind of gorge themselves. But after a while, I kind of stopped doing that. When you have a bit of clover around a lot of the paddocks, they seem to adapt to it. Probably the rumen adapts a little bit. In terms of the multi-species sward, it doesn't seem to be an issue. Research might elaborate on this, but I certainly haven't heard it reported. And the theory would be that when you have a diverse sward, so you have lots of different kind of fiber lengths and types, and you're not getting a dominance then by, say, a legume that'll have these kind of surfactants and things that causes the bloat. So I wouldn't see it as being a problem at all in a diverse multi-species sward. I don't know, Aidan maybe or Patti might have other comments on it.
I suppose it's a question that comes up with nearly every discussion group, and I suppose it's everything is grand until it's not, basically, because so we have small numbers. We haven't had any problems with bloat yet, but our trial is small. We're only looking at 20 cows. The other thing with us is that they're on multi-species the whole time, so they're not probably transferring from grass clover to multi-species and back, or again, which is probably a higher risk. Now we do have some other treatments that are moving in and out to multi-species swards, but like what Neil was saying, the biggest risk time is really that sort of September, October period, wet, lush grass. So if you use your common sense, I suppose, and if you think there's a risk period, do maybe what Neil was doing and give him a small bit and graze down tight. Or the other option is, if you're on a 36-hour allocation, let him in on 24 hours when they're still full, and then go back out and finish off your other paddock, and then move back to the multi-species again. So there's ways of mitigating against it. But it is like if you lose one cow, you have to. It still pays for a lot of nitrogen and all as well. So it is something to be conscious of. I think it's probably less of an issue on multi-species swards because they're probably more of a balance and there's a bit more fibrous content. And the plantain is supposed to be an anti-bloating agent as well. So and that plantain is persistent. So again, it's there's a lot of multi-species gone in over farms right across the country over the last couple of years. So it's something that I suppose advisors and yourselves, Cathal, we'll have to monitor over the years to come. And so all I can say, we haven't had any problems with it yet, neither on the beef unit or Neil hasn't, but then some farmers may counter it. But
yeah, look, solid advice not to be going letting a herd of cows in from a grass sward straight into even a grass clover sward hungry. That's a big thing, so they're not gorging themselves. But another thing, I suppose, I think that people are wondering about as well, and there's a question here on it. Silage. Have you cut bales or have you cut pit, or how did you get on with silage and the multi-species swards? Aidan, I think you've cut a bit there, have you?
Yeah, like what Patti said in the video, our system is a self-contained system, so we have to make enough silage on our multi-species to feed them through the winter. We were slightly short on it last year. We'll probably go closer to making enough for the whole winter this year. All ours is in the form of bales because, like I said, the trial is so small. Like we've only a 7.5 hectare platform, so it just wouldn't be practical to try and make a pit out of it. We've made excellent quality silage on the multi-species. I know Patti has in the beef unit as well. The only thing is it's 3 to 4% units lower in dry matter, so it's important to get a wilt. So you do have to watch that. I suppose watch the weather forecast a little bit and get that ideally a 3-day window really where you're cutting the crop, say on say it's drying in the first day, you're cutting it that evening or the following morning, or ideally in the afternoon, wilting it the second day, and then bale maybe the third day. We didn't need to toss it out this year to dry it or anything because we had good conditions for most of the time we were making the silage. But you probably could shorten that window by tedding it, and you might make it in 2 days. But just be conscious. It will make very good silage. Protein tends to be a little bit higher in it, probably because of the clover content. And digestibility was around 75, 76 DMD for a good lot of hours there last year, which would have been slightly higher than our grass clover system. But I wouldn't be concerned. That wouldn't be one of my concerns at the moment. But just it may be trickier in higher rainfall areas where it's harder to get that window.
Yeah, just make sure it's dry. There's a tricky one here for you, Saoirse. I don't know if you'll have the answer for it or not, but sure, throw your hat at it anyway. Methane, and we're talking about greenhouse gases and gaseous emissions and nitrous oxide. But you can comment on nitrous oxide in a minute, but methane, is there any work done to suggest or look at this? Is there a possibility that multi-species swards might reduce methane emissions from cows?
There's been a few studies abroad and kind of on more cut and carry systems. So the answer is yes and no. Some results show that they do reduce direct emissions by a small amount, and some have seen no result. But there has been some studies that show that multi-species swards will reduce the emissions intensity because the animals are actually performing better. So there's kind of a lower cost of methane for a kg milk solid or actual milk yield as well. But not in Ireland, no. So it's something I think that will be looked at.
Okay, so small game, but there's the work is not there yet. What about nitrous oxide? That's one of the most potent greenhouse gases.
Yeah, exactly. So with multi-species swards, one of the big pluses and why they've become more popular late is obviously they've been shown to perform well on less and sometimes on no nitrogen. So if we look at nitrous oxide, it's 30% of our agricultural greenhouse gas emissions, with nearly half of that N2O coming from your nitrogen fertiliser. So the less nitrogen that's going into the soil system, the less it's going to be lost. Plantain as well. There's been studies to show that there's actually compounds in plantain that will stabilize nitrogen in the soil system. So the more stable it is, the less likely it is to be lost via true nitrous oxide emissions or true nitrate leaching as well.
Yeah. And it's important to mention as well, that's just one of many different functions you can use. And you look at the Teagasc MAC curve as well to come out to look at different areas where we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and our ammonia emissions. But we'll have to wrap it up soon because we're nearly at 8 o'clock. But I have a couple of really important questions. I think maybe Patti, you might mention this one, or Aidan maybe. Rotation lengths, have they changed in the main growing season? You know, are you every 21 days? Are you 25 days, 30 days? Or is it similar to perennial ryegrass, or what's it looking like?
Patti, do you want to take that for the beef unit first anyway?
Yeah, no worries. We would try to maintain it all the same. So we're sticking at the 21 and then extending it later in the year. Yeah. It was just early in the spring. This year it was just a cold spring, so we had to extend the multi-species a bit compared to the other two. But once the temperatures picked up, we were okay.
Yeah, and that would be similar enough with us too, Cathal. I think Neil mentioned it in the video there as well. So, and Patti is the same. We're grass measuring weekly, so it's really determined by your pre-grazing cover, similar to grass sward. So our target pre-grazing yields will determine when we go in. So it's generally that between 18 and 22 days, I suppose, really during the main grazing season, depending on growth rates. But once it's hitting 1500, we're going in and grazing it. And if it goes over 16, 17, 1800, ideally we're closing up and taking out a surplus, and we're using that as there's probably none of our swards in the dairy didn't see a blade at some stage during the year. And it's a good way of sort of managing that, sort of getting that base back down to standard height, whether that be 4, 5 or 6 centimeters. But so it's either, I think one paddock might have been top, but most of it had a surplus taken out at some stage during the year.
And Patti, on the beef plots, on the beef animals, did you see any increase in production or growth rates?
Everything maintained the same level. Nothing outdone anything else. But it's early days yet. We're only in the first season of the trial, so we've just started killing out some of the first cattle off the trial. About 20 months. The clover so far has the best fat scores. We're aiming for a 250 kilo carcass, and they've all achieved that, if not more. But they're all at the same level for now. It's early days yet. We'll see next year when everything really gets going.
Yeah, and I know from some other research that's published, there is results out there to show that both beef and lamb are actually good growth rates off the back of it, so improved growth rates. So something to keep an eye on. Now, look, we're really running over time there now, so I'm going to ask one last question. There's a load of really good questions coming in. And look, if we haven't got your question answered here today, we'll try and answer for you and get them out to you at a later stage, okay? But there's one, I suppose, question that farmers often ask as well, and not just for multi-species swards, but for clover, grass clover swards as well. Neil, might get you to answer this one. What is the sward like? You haven't got to the stage yet where your sward is coming into the spring, I suppose. What are you expecting?
As in terms of the spring cover?
Yeah, what do you expect it's going to be like?
Yeah, I expect it's going to be quite open, Cathal. There's a lot of clover in there, and we won't be seeing a lot of that, I guess, for the first rotation. So yeah, but it's just a learning curve. It wouldn't bother me again, like some of the other things. We'll cope with those management issues as they arrive. We'll alter our grazing strategy and plug the deficit. The benefits are too many to be turned, to turn your nose up at. So if there is a lighter cover in the springtime, we'll deal with that. Yeah.
I might just have a quick comment on that as well, Cathal, if you. Yeah. No, just like, no, very few farmers are going to have, say, we would see that more open in the spring as well, but very few farmers are going to have 100% multi-species swards. No farmer really. So like some farmers are going to have multi-species swards established over the last year or two, which will be maybe a little bit more open. Hopefully, if what we hope will happen, the clover will fill in. So some farmers will have maybe 30% multi-species, 30% good grass clover swards, maybe reduce nitrogen there, and a portion of the farm might still have perennial ryegrass getting 200 kilos of N. And you can manage your covers then. If you can target sort of closing up and your grass covers and grazing them first, or I think the big thing is to be prepared, similar to grass clover system, that have a bank of sort of good quality grass silage in that if you have to supplement even at milking time or anything, or you're probably only talking about 200 or 300 kilos of dry matter per cow. So have a bale of silage per cow, that if you need to, if the growth is a bit slower. What I would have seen over the last 2 years in mid-March, when daylight gets longer and the temperatures rise a little bit, the multi-species actually exploded and probably passed out the conventional growth rates over that sort of late March period. So you're probably talking about that 3-4 week period. I know it's that 3 or 4 week period where grass is precious, but similar to Neil, it wouldn't be my biggest concern. And maybe like if farmers, like what Neil said, if farmers don't dip their toes into it and start, it's probably like a breeding program with a genetic breeding program with cows. It's a slow process. So if you're only going to be receiving 10 or 15% of your farm every year, it'll be 10 years before, if you don't start now, it could be 15 years. You might be retiring before you start. So it's just that's something like there's a lot more work to be done on it, and we're not sure of it yet. But there's it's probably the benefits that we're seeing at farm level and what we've seen so far, it's probably a bit too much to be ignored.
Yeah, I would agree. And compound that, fertiliser price has gone through the roof. So I think that's important. Neil, I'm going to put you on the spot now to finish up, and apologies in advance. But anyway, you mentioned in the video, maybe get down off the fence if people are wondering about multi-species swards. You're on a moderate to intensive dairy farm there. It's a good business that you're running there, and I know you're sharp operators yourself and Gillian. Do you have any wise words or comments that you could say to farmers that are thinking about it after watching this?
I think the biggest fear I think I might have about it is maybe ending up in a few years' time looking back and regretting not putting more of it in. I honestly, as I said, and Aidan has touched on it, there's management ways and means to cope with the challenges that it might give in terms of spring growth and whatever else. But we're used to that. We're always dealing with variation, with growth variation, with weather variation. As Aidan said, you have a reserve of silage there, and you don't leave yourself too exposed. But yeah, definitely try it. And my advice, as I said in the video, would be to try it somewhere where you're not particularly happy with what's there to begin with. Now, not neglecting the fertility status of the field when you're establishing the reseed, but give it a go. Give it a go somewhere where you have nothing to lose. And I think the results are going to be good.
That's a great way to finish. Look, so that's all we have time for this evening. I'd just like to thank our panel, Dr. Saoirse Cummins, Patti Roche, Aidan Lawless. Very special thanks to Neil O'Sullivan for taking the time out to join us this evening. But not just that, also go out and sort us out for the video and letting us onto the farm. It was great to get out there and to, especially to show other farmers how another farmer is doing it. So I think that's really important. Not to forget, in the background, we have Luis Lopez-Sangel, we have Anna Fenlon, we have Siobhan Darmody, we have Katrina Boyle and Eileen Flynn, all working away behind the scenes there. And really special thanks to our sponsors, Science Foundation Ireland and Teagasc. And thanks also to Teagasc Science Week Committee, who put together a full programme of events for the Festival of Farming for Food. The programme continues tomorrow in the National Botanic Gardens in Dublin, and this event starts at 12:30. You can register for this and all other events on the Teagasc website, www.teagasc.ie, and you'll see all the details on the main page here. Make sure to have a look because there's lots of good stuff going on this week. Now, if you'd like to be in with a chance to win €50 one for all voucher just in time for Christmas, all you have to do is fill out a survey and tell us what you thought of the event. You'll be emailed after the event to take the survey. And look, we'd really appreciate it if you could take some time to fill it out because it helps us improve our events for the future. Give us a few tips. I'm sure, and it's another thing just want to let you know on as well, you probably heard some of the ads going around for Creating Our Future initiative, which is a campaign run by the government to find out from the public what we think we should be doing for scientific research in the future. And we'd like to invite you to tell us about your ideas for what researchers in Ireland should explore to create a better future. You can submit your ideas through the website until the end of November at www.creatingourfuture.ie. It'll only take a few minutes, so why not try and submit a few ideas when you have the opportunity. So again, look, thank you all for joining us. We have a great number of viewers this evening. It's great to see there's such interest there. And I hope you enjoyed learning a bit about multispecies swards. And I'd just like to finish with something that Neil said in the video. I think it's a lovely way to finish. The only thing that we have to fear is standing still and not being able to adapt or change. So that's really important, I think. And as we can all see from the chat with Neil today, I certainly think farmers in Ireland are up to the challenge and are hitting the ground running with multispecies swards. And just remember, that's just one of a number of tools that we have in our arsenal. So take care and enjoy the rest of Science Week. Thanks a million.
Thank you.